Mark thought his marriage was built on love, but the truth was built on a lie. And when his wife finally uncovered who he really was, everything they built shattered in a single night. The kitchen was still vibrating with leftover anger when it happened. A glass lay shattered across the tile floor, its pieces catching the glow of the flashing police lights outside. Mark sat with his back against the cabinet, knees pulled to his chest like a scared kid trying to disappear. His breathing was shallow, almost frantic. You could tell he wasn't just shaken. He was terrified of something bigger than the argument that had just erupted. Lena stood a few feet away, clutching the folder she had found hidden in his metal toolbox. She held it with the same tension someone might hold a wild animal. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at him as if the man she thought she knew had evaporated in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt like a vacuum pulling the air from the room. When she finally whispered, her voice trembled. "Who are you, Mark?" He didn't look up, didn't even try to meet her eyes. Instead, he pressed the heels of his palms against his forehead, as if trying to hold his head together. The folder was open just enough for Lena to see pieces of the truth. A driver's license photo that wasn't quite him, but also was. A different name, a different birth date, papers stamped with agencies she'd never heard of, and a photo of Mark with a woman and 2 children she had never seen before in her life. And for Lena, that moment felt like the ground beneath her cracked straight down the middle. When Mark finally spoke, the words barely escaped his throat. "I'm not the man you think I am." That sentence didn't just hang in the air, it detonated. Lena felt her chest tighten, her throat close. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the fear of the answers locked her tongue in place. The man she built a life with, the man she trusted, the man she loved, had just admitted something she didn't even know how to process. Outside, the sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights danced across the walls. It wasn't clear whether they were passing by or coming straight toward their house. The tension made it impossible to tell where reality stopped and panic began. Lena stepped back, her mind racing with scenarios she wasn't ready to confront. Was he dangerous? Was he running from something? Was she in danger? Mark's shoulders started to shake. Not from anger, from fear. "You weren't supposed to find that," he whispered. Those words carried a weight heavier than any explanation he could have offered. It wasn't denial. It wasn't a mistake. It was a secret he had protected for years. Lena felt her fingers go numb around the folder. Her voice cracked. "Is any of this real? Our marriage? Our life? Or was all of it part of whatever this is?" Mark finally looked up, and the expression on his face wasn't cold or clever or calculating. It was broken, like a man who had been running from a truth he could never outrun. His eyes glistened, and he looked like he was searching for the right words, the right way to tell her something that would either save them or destroy everything. Before he could answer, a loud knock pounded against the front door. 3 sharp hits. Authoritative, measured, unmistakable. Lena froze. Mark's eyes widened. The sirens outside faded into a hum, but the knock echoed through the house like a warning. Someone was there. Someone who knew exactly where to find him. Lena whispered, barely audible, "Mark, who's at the door?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The fear in his eyes said more than words ever could. And in that instant, one question hovered over everything like a storm cloud. Do we ever really know the people we love? 3 weeks before the night, everything exploded. The house felt different, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It was the kind of quiet where something hides underneath, waiting for the right moment to surface. Lena didn't notice it all at once. It came in small moments, little threads that didn't connect at first. A skipped answer here, a strange reaction there, a doorbell that made Mark freeze like he'd seen a ghost. It started on a Saturday morning. She was in the kitchen making coffee when she heard the mailbox clang shut. Mark came a moment later, holding a stack of envelopes. His face changed when he saw one of them. He didn't say a word. He just slipped a letter into his back pocket like he hoped she wouldn't notice. But Lena did. Wives always do. It was addressed to a name she didn't recognize. Not Mark. Not anything close. When she asked who it was for, he shrugged with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Probably junk mail," he said, too casually. but something in his voice trembled. That was the first crack. The second came when she asked about his family one evening. They were watching TV, the glow of the screen dancing across the living room walls. Lena mentioned how her sister wanted them to visit for the holidays. Mark tensed, not annoyed, scared. Like even the idea of family made him uncomfortable. "Can we just not talk about family stuff tonight?" he said, forcing a laugh. But his hands were shaking. The third crack came in the quiet hours of the night. Lena woke up to find the bathroom light on. Mark was sitting on the floor, phone in hand, staring at something with a look of dread. When she asked what was wrong, he locked the screen so fast it almost slipped out of his hand. He smiled again, another fake one, and said, "Just couldn't sleep." But the sweat on his forehead told a different story. And then, the turning point. One afternoon, while organizing the closet, Lena found a small cardboard box tucked behind old shoes. Nothing suspicious at first, but inside was a DNA testing kit, unopened and used and never mentioned. Mark had never said he was doing a test. He'd never brought up anything about ancestry or medical history. The box shouldn't have been there, hidden the way it was. Something in her chest tightened. She held it in her hands for a long time, staring at the seal, wondering what he was trying to find out, or what he was trying to avoid finding out. Why would someone hide a DNA kit unless they were afraid of the truth it might reveal? When she confronted him later, he brushed it off. "A coworker gave it to me," he said. But the panic in his voice didn't match the story. The next day, Lena noticed the kit was gone. She searched everywhere. Closet, trash, car trunk, nothing. Mark must have hidden it again. That's when the fear turned into determination. She drove to the drugstore, bought the same kit, and filled it out herself. She mailed it, not because she wanted to catch him in a lie, but because she needed to understand what she was living in. She needed to know whether the uneasiness in her chest was real or just her imagination running wild. As she dropped the envelope into the mailbox, her fingers trembled. "Am I doing the right thing?" she whispered to herself. But the envelope had already slid inside. There was no turning back. Driving home, a wave of guilt hit her. She kept replaying memories of their first dates, their wedding, the promises they made. She kept asking herself why she suddenly didn't trust the man who once felt like her safest place. But trust isn't something that disappears overnight. It erodes, piece by piece, question by question. And now the biggest question was looming. What if the truth she was chasing was something she wasn't ready to find? That night, as she lay in bed beside Mark, listening to his steady breathing, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man she loved was slipping away from her, like he was already halfway out of the life they built together, and she was only just noticing. 3 weeks earlier, the cracks were small. But cracks, when ignored, don't stay small for long. The email landed in Lena's inbox on a Wednesday morning, just after 9 a.m. She hadn't been thinking about the kid at all. In fact, she convinced herself the results would show nothing strange, just a regular ancestry breakdown, maybe a few unexpected relatives. Nothing life-changing, nothing dangerous. But when she saw the subject line, "Your DNA results are ready," her stomach dropped in a way she didn't expect. She hovered over the message for a few seconds, staring at the screen as if opening the email might open a door she couldn't close again. The house was quiet. Mark had already left for work. She was alone with her thoughts, her fears, and a growing sense that the truth was about to rewrite her entire life. When she finally clicked the email, her body tensed. At first, everything looked normal. Percentages, regions, genetic traits, all the typical stuff that feels interesting at parties but doesn't mean much. Then her eyes drifted to the section labeled close matches. That's where her breath caught in her chest. The list didn't show distant cousins or second relatives. It showed a direct match, a brother, a living mother marked as presumed alive based on DNA activity, and a name, one she had never heard before. It wasn't Mark, not even close. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth went dry. She scrolled down, hoping she was misreading it, misinterpreting something, but the screen didn't change. The man she married wasn't who he said he was, not even on paper. A sharp jolt of fear rushed through her. She stood up, pacing the kitchen, gripping her phone like it might vanish from her hands. Everything suddenly felt unreal. The counter, the floor, the morning light. She wondered how many times she had looked into Mark's eyes and believed in a man who never truly existed. Compelled by instinct, she started searching the house. Maybe she was hoping for something familiar to ground her, or maybe she knew, somewhere deep down, that she'd find exactly what she feared. In the back of the hall closet, inside the old jacket Mark never wore, she found a small photograph tucked into a sewn-in pocket. The picture was worn, edges curled as if it had been handled 1,000 times. It showed a younger Mark, maybe 8 or 9, standing next to 2 adults and another boy. The parents' faces were tired, hollow, like life had weighed them down too soon. The boy beside him looked eerily similar. Same eyes, same smile. A brother. One Mark had never, ever mentioned. She felt her throat tighten. A chill crept down her spine. This wasn't a small lie. This wasn't a harmless omission. This was an entire life he had buried. Right then, her phone buzzed. At first, she thought it was an alert or spam. But when she looked down, her blood ran cold. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. She knows now. Her heart nearly stopped. She stumbled back, gripping the countertop. Someone was watching. Someone new, she found out. Someone who wasn't Mark. For a moment, she considered calling him. But fear made her lock the phone instead. She didn't know if she wanted to hear his voice or run from it. If she wanted him to explain, or if she was terrified he actually could. That evening, she tried to act normal. She cooked dinner, even though her hands shook with every chopped onion. She set the table. She rehearsed what she would say, if she would reveal what she knew immediately or wait for the right moment. But there was no right moment for something like this. There was only the truth and the fallout that was about to follow. Mark walked in with his usual smile. He kissed her cheek, asked about her day, told her his had been long. She watched every movement, every expression, wondering how many times he had practiced pretending. Halfway through dinner, she couldn't hold it anymore. "I got an email today," she said softly. Mark paused, fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes flickered with something subtle. Fear, guilt, recognition. "What email?" he asked too quickly. She held his gaze, her voice barely steady. "The DNA results." For a moment, the entire world seemed to freeze. Mark didn't blink, didn't breathe. The fork slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the plate. His face drained of color, like someone had pulled the life out of him with a single sentence. He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "Lena, please, let's talk about this." But she shook her head. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't need you to talk. I need you to tell me the truth." Mark closed his eyes, and for the first time since she met him, she saw pure, unfiltered fear. Not the kind of fear someone feels when they make a small mistake, but the kind they feel when their entire existence is about to unravel. And the question hovered between them like an invisible storm. Is the truth always better than the lies we tell to feel safe? For a long moment after Lena confronted him, Mark didn't move. He sat there at the table with his head bowed, hands pressed against his forehead, breathing like someone who had been underwater for too long and finally broke the surface. The silence between them stretched until it felt painful. The kind of silence that only comes before a truth that can't be taken back. When he finally lifted his eyes to meet hers, something inside him seemed to collapse. "Lena, I need you to listen. Please, just listen." His voice cracked, and she could tell this wasn't a rehearsed response or a quick lie he could hide behind. This was something deeper, something old. He pushed his chair back slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile stability remained in the room. He walked toward the window and stared out into the dark yard, the reflection of the porch light stretching across the glass like a ghost of the life he'd tried to create. "I wasn't supposed to make it this far," he said quietly. "I wasn't supposed to have a normal life. I wasn't supposed to have you." Lena felt her chest tighten. She didn't interrupt. She needed answers, and he needed to finally stop running. Mark took a deep breath, bracing himself. "My name isn't Mark." It was the kind of truth that doesn't land all at once. It sinks slowly, spreading through the room like cold air. He turned toward her, his voice trembling. "The name I gave you, the life I told you about. I built it because I couldn't survive the one I came from. Then came the story he'd buried for more than 15 years. He grew up in a small town an hour away, a place Lena had never heard him mention. His family wasn't just broken. They were dangerous in ways a child shouldn't have had to understand. His father's anger was a storm that never passed. His mother lived in constant fear. And his older brother, Alex, was left to take the blows that were meant for everyone else. One night, when Mark was 17, everything changed. He described it slowly, as if even the memory hurt to touch. A fight, a slammed door, shouting that felt like thunder. Then the sound that split their family forever, a crash followed by a scream. Mark found his brother lying on the floor, their father standing over him, blood pooling, chaos, fear, shock. He didn't even have words. By the time police arrived, his father was gone, disappeared into the night. Their mother broke completely. The system took the boys, split them apart, and within weeks, Mark was moved to a group home. He never saw his mother again, never saw Alex again. Every part of his life had been swallowed by the aftermath. So he ran, not from guilt, not from crime, but from the memory of a life he wanted to erase. I changed everything, he said. My name, my story. I thought if I became someone new, I could finally breathe. Lena felt tears fill her eyes. It wasn't the story she expected. It wasn't the neat confession of a villain or a double life. It was the confession of a boy who'd been fighting shadows for half his life. But then came the part that chilled her, the part he had never told anyone. Someone found me, he whispered. A few months ago. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you mean, found you? Mark swallowed hard. I got a voicemail. No name. Just a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. My brother. Saying he was alive. Saying he'd been looking for me. Saying I couldn't hide forever. Lena felt the room tilt slightly. His brother, alive. Searching. Watching. Mark's eyes filled with a panic that made her chest tighten. He knows where we live, Lena. He knows about you. He said he wanted to talk, but I didn't believe it. I didn't know what he wanted or who else might be with him. So I hid everything. Elite. Because I was afraid of dragging you into the nightmare I escaped. This wasn't just a family secret. This was a past that had grown teeth and followed him. Lena's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now, he whispered. She turned away, trying to steady herself. The truth was heavy, messy, painful. But it was the truth. Not a polished version. Not a safe version. The real one. Then Mark's phone buzzed on the table, making both of them jump. He picked it up slowly. When he saw the voicemail notification, his face drained of color. He played it on speaker before Lena could stop him. A man's voice, familiar, rough, trembling with emotion. Little brother, I know you're scared, but you can't run from this anymore. We need to talk. The message ended. The room went still, and Lena realized the truth wasn't done unfolding. The past wasn't finished with them, not even close. And the question hit her like a whisper she couldn't silence. Can someone build an honest life on a foundation of fear? The knock at the door wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. It was steady, measured, like whoever stood on the other side already knew they would be let in. Lena's heart pounded as she stared at Mark, who looked like he had just seen a ghost. His eyes were wide, unfocused, almost pleading with her not to answer. But the knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate hits that vibrated through the quiet house. Mark, Lena whispered, her voice barely holding together. Is that him? Mark didn't respond. He didn't nod. He just closed his eyes and exhaled a breath that sounded like surrender. Before she could stop him, he walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. When he opened it, the porch light spilled over a man standing in the shadows. He looked like Mark, older, rougher around the edges, eyes tired but sharp, a face shaped by years of surviving instead of living. Hey, little brother, the man said softly. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. This was Alex, the brother Mark believed he'd lost, the brother he ran from, the brother whose voice had haunted his phone. Mark leaned against the doorframe, overwhelmed. I wasn't ready for this, he whispered. Alex stepped inside without waiting to be invited, like someone who once belonged there. He scanned the living room, the photos on the wall, the half-eaten dinner on the table. His gaze softened when he looked at Lena. "You must be Lena," he said. There was no malice in his tone, just a painful kind of familiarity. "You've been living in the shadow of a story you didn't know you were part of." Lena swallowed hard. She didn't trust him. She didn't distrust him. She was caught in that dangerous space in between. Mark stood rigid, fists clenched. "What do you want, Alex?" Alex let out a small, humorless laugh. "You think I came here to hurt you? After everything we went through? I came because Mom is alive, Mark. She's alive, and she's been looking for you." The room fell silent. Lena felt like the floor shifted beneath her feet. Their mother, the woman Mark believed died long ago, was alive? Mark's voice cracked. "No, no, she can't be. They told me. They were wrong." Alex interrupted gently. "She got out after Dad disappeared. She survived. And every year, she wrote you a letter. Every single year. Even when she didn't know where you were." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of old envelopes, tied with a faded ribbon. But he didn't hand them to Mark. He handed them to Lena. "She wanted you to have these," Alex said. "She said if Mark ever built a life with someone, that person deserved the truth too." Lena held the letters carefully, as if they were made of glass. The edges were worn, some stained with smudges that looked suspiciously like tears. The dates stretched back years, farther than she'd even known Mark. Mark shook his head, backing away like the letters were something dangerous. "I can't," he murmured. "I can't read them." Alex sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know you're scared, Mark. God, I know. But running hasn't saved you. It's only kept you stuck in the same nightmare." He turned toward the door. "I'm staying at the motel off Route 19. You don't have to come see me. But Mom, she's waiting, and she's not getting any younger." He paused before leaving. Then, in a quieter voice, "You're not alone anymore. Not unless you choose to be." The moment the door closed behind him, the house felt colder, quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. Lena looked at the stack of letters. Her hands trembled. "Mark, do you want me to read them?" He stared at the floor, jaw tight, eyes shining with the weight of years he never unpacked. "No," he whispered. "I can't. Not yet." He turned away, but she noticed something, the smallest tremor in his shoulders. The way he swallowed, like holding back a lifetime of unspoken pain. He wasn't refusing the letters. He was terrified of what they might heal or break. Lena placed the letters gently on the table. The weight of them filled the room like a quiet storm building on the horizon. One question echoed through her mind, refusing to fade. Do we run from our past? Or does it eventually follow us home? The house was silent after Alex left. Not peaceful, just still, the kind of stillness that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. The stack of letters lay on the table between Lena and Mark like a living thing, pulsing with years of secrets, pain, and unanswered questions. Mark paced the room, hands shaking. "I can't open them, Lena. I can't." His voice cracked through the quiet like a branch snapping in a forest. Lena approached him slowly, gently, like reaching out to someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "You don't have to read them alone," she said softly. But Mark shook his head hard, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "You don't understand. If I open those letters, I have to feel everything I've locked away, everything I ran from. I barely survived it once." She stepped closer. "You survived it, Mark. That means you can face it. And maybe this time, you don't have to survive it alone." He didn't respond. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, like he was wrestling with something inside him. Part fear, part longing, part disbelief that someone could still stand beside him after everything he'd hidden. Finally, Lena reached for the first envelope. The paper was soft from age, yellowed around the edges. The handwriting was shaky, a mother's handwriting. A mother who never stopped writing to a son who never stopped running. "Let me read it," she whispered. Mark hesitated. Then, with a trembling sigh, he nodded. "Just once." She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded with the kind of tenderness only a mother carries. She unfolded it and began reading aloud. "My sweet boy, I don't know where you are, but I pray every night that you're safe. I hope someone out there is treating you with the gentleness you always deserved. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the storms inside our home. You were just a child, Yet you carried so much fear in those quiet eyes. Mark closed his eyes, jaw trembling. If you're angry at me, I understand. If you hate me, I understand. But if you ever need a home, if you ever need someone to say your name with love instead of fear, I am here. I will always be here. Lena felt her throat tighten. Tears blurred her vision as she continued. You were never the reason for the pain. You were the reason I kept going. The last line made Mark crumble. He sank into a chair, hands covering his face as years of buried emotions broke free. Grief, relief, guilt, tenderness, everything he'd never allowed himself to feel. His shoulders shook silently. Lena knelt beside him, resting her hand on his back. He didn't push her away. For the first time since she found the folder, he wasn't lying. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was just Mark, broken, scared, human, and loved. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. All this time, I thought disappearing made things easier for her. I thought I was protecting her by leaving. But she was searching for me. She never stopped. Lena cupped his face gently. She didn't give up on you. And I'm not giving up on you either. The next morning, Mark made a decision he never thought he'd make. He picked up the stack of letters, every single one, and put them in a small bag. He grabbed his jacket. Lena stood beside him, lacing her fingers with his. Are you sure? She asked. He nodded. I've been running my whole life. It's time to stop. They drove together to the motel where Alex was staying. Each mile felt like peeling back another layer of fear. When they arrived, Alex opened the door instantly, as if he'd been waiting. Mark didn't say a word at first. Instead, he held up the bag of letters. I want to see her, he whispered. Alex's eyes filled with tears. She's going to be so happy, Mark. The three of them sat in that small motel room. Brothers reunited, a wife standing strong at her husband's side. And for the first time, Mark didn't feel like a piece of his past. He felt like a person with a future. In the days that followed, Mark met his mother. The reunion wasn't perfect. It wasn't magical. It was real, messy, emotional, filled with years of lost time. But it was healing, and it was his. He started therapy, slowly rebuilding the parts of himself he'd kept locked away. And with every truth he faced, his life with Lena grew stronger. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally honest. The night everything cracked open had felt like the end. But sometimes the end of a lie is the beginning of a life you finally deserve. And one question lingers for anyone listening. What truth in your own life is still waiting for you to face it? If this story moved you, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Family secrets, forgiveness, and truth shape us more than we realize. And somewhere out there, someone might need to hear your story to feel less alone. More real human stories are on the way. Stay with us.